What is the probability that something sinister is looking at you right now? On a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate what happened to me today by 8 points. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, I was driving home from my parents. They live only 10 minutes away from me, but it's a terrible 10 minutes. There are no lanterns in the village. It's Michigan in the middle of winter, and I foolishly decided to return home by the shortest but worst way. On the same road where I ran into a deer 2 months ago. It took all the money I'd been saving for Christmas to make the repairs. I was driving 2 times slower than the speed limit, constantly looking out for one of the 4-legged, white-tailed monsters. The headlights of an oncoming car shone into my eyes. She was about half a kilometer away from me, but her high beam was on. I didn't get distracted, afraid that some horned car would jump out onto the road. When I pulled up, I realized it was a pickup truck. The car wasn't moving. It was standing on the side of the road. The car's emergency lights were on. I slowed down, expecting to see signs of a collision with a deer, a dent in the bumper, a broken windshield, a fallen side mirror, and of course, the corpse of the deer itself. As I got closer, I didn't notice any signs of an accident. Now that the headlights were no longer blinding my eyes, I saw that the pickup truck was pulling a horse trailer behind it. I opened the window to talk to the driver, but soon realized that the truck was empty. "Hello," I shouted. There is no answer. Then I heard a grinding sound, then a knock. It seemed to me that someone was tapping on an overturned bowl. The sound came from behind the trailer. I looked out the windshield and saw a rope tied to the handle of the trailer. I couldn't see the whole rope, just the loop around the handle, but at the same time, I noticed that the loop knot was sliding up and down the handle. I drove closer. The sudden movement made me flinch, and then I realized what an idiot I was. The rope led to a horse standing nearby. A large bay animal was trampling on the spot by the ditch. Deciding that I was annoying her, I turned off the headlights. She kept stomping on the spot. Judging by the hoof prints in the snow and mud, the animal had been standing here for a long time. I shouted again, expecting to hear an answer from the dark field. Nothing. My gaze dropped back to the ground. I'm not a Boy Scout, but fresh snow can tell you a lot. In the red light of the trailer's headlights, I could easily make out the boot marks that the owner of the pickup had obviously left. The tracks ran along the back of the trailer into the ditch, where the red light of the headlights didn't reach. It looks like the horse escaped from the stable, and the owner came here to get it back. I felt like a detective. There were boot marks on the ground between the horse and the trailer. They led in different directions, as if their owner was shifting from one foot to the other. New prints were mixed in with them. They resembled a huge letter Y, with a line in the middle. At the end of each print, there was a small crack left by a claw in the snow. These tracks were just as chaotic, but their owner was clearly trying to stay close to the road. The owner of the pickup truck would have to pass by whoever left the tracks to get back into the car. Judging by the intertwining of human footprints, and I guess we could call it some kind of animal tracks. They walked along the road, moving away from the pickup and trailer. Their prints were mixed up, as if the owner of the paws was following a man in boots. The creature moved with the same long strides as a human. I looked back at the still agitated horse, then at the tracks behind the trailer. The snow illuminated by the trailer was red, but I definitely noticed that in some places the snow was colored in a different shade of red. Despite the lighting, it seemed to me that there were several long scratches on the horse's side. I don't consider myself a fool, and I didn't see the point in staying on the road and playing detective. Deciding to get away from the horse, trailer, and pickup truck, I turned on the headlights and drove. The horse was staring at me intently. Her gaze was like the expression on the face of a homeless man who hadn't been given a dime in a day. As I drove away, I couldn't take my eyes off the tracks left by this man, and it was unclear what happened next. 10 meters from the pickup truck, there was clearly another collision. Both chains of tracks got mixed up. A pair of dark red spots appeared nearby, then only shoe tracks remained, which continued their way. But on the snow on the side, there was an imprint about the height of a man. Both sides of the body were visible, contours. They were wide and looked like the imprint of a jacket lying in the snow. The contours moved away from the body print, leaving traces of dragging. They were also ribbed. I admit that I noticed all this in passing. It's hard to describe it exactly, but looking back, I can say with confidence that this imprint cannot be called a snow angel. I moved on, but because of the slippery road, I tried to drive slower. 3-toed footprints appeared in the snow again. They stretched for several meters and then broke off. The boot prints continued for another 10 meters and then stopped. At that moment, I stopped. My brain wanted to make sure that my eyes hadn't let me down. 2 chains of footprints, human and non-human, suddenly broke off. There was no hint of a turn or jump anywhere. Nothing. There was only pure, untouched snow on both sides. It seems that something went wrong in my head. Trying to put all the details together, I looked back at the trailer, still surrounded by a flickering red halo. The horse was still looking after me. And then something moved on the road. It was the headlights of a pickup truck. They twitched. The taillights also twitched. They dipped slightly down and then rose again, as if something pressed on the suspension. The trailer swayed. The horse was no longer looking at me. She was looking into the dark space on the roof of the trailer. The horse was trying to free itself from the rope that held it with such fury as I had never seen before. I didn't even notice when I hit the gas. I've lost count of how many times I almost drove into a ditch on the way home. One time I accidentally drove into the oncoming lane, but I never lost control. Luck and a strong desire to escape from this cursed road helped me. What is the probability that something sinister is looking at you right now? I'm staying down the path in front of the house right now. I hope the garage door isn't jammed, because now I have a tens moment. A street lamp illuminates part of the roof of my house. There is fresh, untouched snow all around. However, in the corner of the roof, I can make out a pair of footprints that break this harmony. I don't think they need to be described. I'm 9 meters from the front door. I'll probably sleep in the car tonight. The Miller house had been abandoned for so long that it seemed it had always been that way. People said the house was cursed, but Tommy wasn't scared by such stories. Tommy Weaver craved recognition and attention, especially from his father, who was consumed by work and rarely paid attention to his son. The boy desperately sought his father's approval and tried in every way to show that he was worthy of his love. A bet with his friends that he could go down into the basement of the house alone wasn't just a game to him. Finally, everyone would see how brave he was. On that cool autumn day, his friends watched from a distance, afraid even to approach the abandoned house. He took a deep breath and yanked open the creaky front door. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Old crooked portraits on the walls seemed to watch his every step. Tommy finally found the door to the basement. Holding his breath, he began to descend the stairs. Near the bottom, his foot caught on something, and he fell forward. His flashlight slipped from his hand and clattered across the stone floor. Breathing heavily, he saw what appeared in the flashlight's light to be a skeleton half buried in the ground. Its bony hand was outstretched. On the skeleton's wrist, a gold bracelet glittered in the dim light. Curiosity overpowered fear. Tommy crawled to the skeleton and grabbed the bracelet. As soon as he touched it, a shiver ran down his spine. The metal was unnaturally cold, and it seemed to emit a faint glow. After one last uncertain glance at the bones, Tommy fastened the bracelet around his wrist, as if marking his triumph. He brushed himself off and picked up the flashlight. As he climbed the stairs, a low, growling whisper echoed from the basement, sending a wave of terror through him. He bolted up the steps, through the house, and out into the street, the whisper following him. In fear, he raced past his friends and ran home, the whispering only stopping when he slammed the front door behind him. That night, Tommy lay in bed, staring at his trophy. He tried to take it off, but it seemed to have fused to his arm. The clasp wouldn't budge. The decision not to tell his parents was made instantly. They would ground him for trespassing and stealing. As he drifted to sleep, he heard the whispering again, growing more insistent. The voices spoke of how his fate was already sealed, how he would become the new prisoner of the house, and how his soul would wander its dark corridors until the end of time. They reminded him of every moment of fear and pain he had ever experienced. Tommy tried to cover his ears, but the whispering echoed. He felt his soul being consumed by icy terror, as if dark shadows were wrapping their vile grip around him. The next morning, Tommy began to notice some movement in the shadows. Soon, he became convinced that he was being watched. He felt as though the empty eye sockets of the skeleton were staring at him, its sinister grin appearing in every reflection. He sensed cold breath on his neck, as if the dead man was nearby, waiting for his moment. Every sound in the house was amplified in his mind. The creaking floorboards now sounded like the steps of an invisible pursuer, and rustling noises resembled the quiet sighs of the dead. As Tommy passed the mirror in the hallway, a fleeting image of the skeleton appeared in the reflection. He quickly turned around, but there was no one there. Attempts to talk to his parents were unsuccessful. No one but him noticed anything strange. By the third day, Tommy began seeing ominous figures and feeling the bracelet tightening around his wrist, leaving a painful red burn. He hid his hand under his clothes, but the burning sensation intensified, and the voices wouldn't stop. His mother tried to calm him down, but he only remained silent. His father, preoccupied with work, didn't notice his son's condition. In the evening, the boy sat in his room, desperately trying to remove the cursed bracelet. The shadows around him seemed to come alive, turning into horrifying creatures. Suddenly, he noticed the figure of the skeleton across from him in the mirror. Its empty eye socket stared straight into his soul, reflecting endless darkness. Tom screamed and turned around. The skeleton hadn't disappeared. "Go away!" he shouted in despair. His heart was pounding wildly, and Tommy felt fear mixed with rage. In the corner of the room stood a baseball bat. Tommy grabbed it. Remembering all the horrors of the past few days, he gripped the bat tightly and charged at the skeleton with a piercing scream. "Leave me alone!" The blow was precise. The bat made a dull thud as it struck the head, and Tommy heard a painful groan. He expected the skeleton to crumble into dust, but the truth pierced his consciousness. Standing before him was his father, with an expression of horror and pain in his eyes. Blood streamed from the wound on his head. Father collapsed to the floor. Overcome with terror, the boy dropped the bat, his scream merging with his father's groan. "Dad? No, this can't be happening." Tommy fell to his knees, his hands trembling, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Tommy, why?" his father whispered, losing consciousness. His mother ran into the room and saw her husband lying on the floor, and her son sobbing in front of him with a wild look in his eyes. A bracelet was lying nearby. Doctors and the police quickly arrived at their home, and they managed to help his father, but Tommy's explanation seemed like madness. They searched the Miller house basement, but there was no skeleton there. "You have to believe me," Tommy shouted as the medics tried to calm him down. "The skeleton, it's real. It's here. It's chasing me." "Calm down, Tommy," the doctor tried to speak gently, though his face showed concern. "You're safe. No one is chasing you." Tommy was given a sedative and taken to the hospital. The bracelet was taken away, but no one could explain the red burn on his arm. The whispering didn't stop, even in his drugged state. He was tormented by visions, its bony hand reaching for him. The chilling voice whispered in his ear, "You will never be free. The curse will be with you forever." Finally, unable to help him, the doctors transferred Tommy to a psychiatric hospital. His father recovered and his parents visited their son, but he barely recognized them through the fog of fear and medication.
"Tommy, it's Mom."
She tried to take his hand, but he pulled away like her touch was burning him.
"We're here to help you. We love you."
"They don't understand," Tommy whispered, looking at his parents with eyes full of terror. "They don't see him. They don't hear." He spent his days in the ward, staring at the spot where the bracelet used to be and listening to the whispering. The doctors called it a psychotic breakdown, but Tommy knew the truth. The house had cursed him, and there was no escape. "They think I've gone mad," he repeated, rocking back and forth. "But I know the truth. I know." Years passed, and the whispering never ceased. Tommy lived his entire life in a psychiatric hospital, but his mind remained forever trapped in that old basement, haunted by the skeleton's whisper.
I was 9 years old. As soon as we crossed the threshold, something in the air made me slow my steps. Judging by the musty smell, this place held secrets a century old. Mom took my hand. "Everything is fine? Let's go." I nodded, and we headed deeper into the new house. Dim rays of sunlight illuminated the outdated interior. The carpets had lost their color, and the faded wallpaper had bubbled and peeled in places. The whole atmosphere hinted that this place hadn't welcomed guests in a long time. I looked at Mom and met her calm smile. She had grown up here, and every corner of this house held her childhood memories. Grandma had passed away a year ago and had left this place to us. I was overcome with homesickness. I was born and raised in Germany and had only seen Grandma once when she visited for Christmas. We had been a normal, happy family, but a month ago, my father left us without explanation. There was no choice. We had to return to my mother's homeland. We reached the room that was supposed to be mine. I immediately noticed the large window, the bed nearby, and the closed attic hatch right behind the door. My throat went dry because tonight I would have to sleep alone in an unfamiliar place for the first time. Grandma had been a seamstress and her husband a master doll maker, but he had disappeared before I was born. In the evening, I helped Mom clean the kitchen. We decided to take some of the boxes down to the basement. A small, creaky staircase led down there. We carefully descended the steps. The smell of earth and dampness hit my nose. My eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness. I shuddered. A slanted figure peeked out from around the corner. Its shoulders were hunched toward the ground, and instead of limbs, there were stumps. Mom froze alongside me. Scared? I was still standing rooted to the spot, unable to take my eyes off the dark figure. "It's just a mannequin. Grandma used it to fit customers' dresses." Mom found a large lever and pulled it down. There was an electric crackle, and a yellow lamp illuminated us. The figure turned out to be a large doll. It didn't resemble store mannequins. It was an actual doll, with a beautifully painted face, long hair, and disturbingly lifelike glass eyes. It used to scare me as a child. "Workers will come in a week. I'll ask them to throw it away. Shall we go?" We returned to the kitchen. A relaxed sigh escaped my chest, but the lingering feeling that someone was watching us remained. "I have a task for you. I'm sure some of my old toys are still around. Find something to play with while I cook up something tasty." I started jumping up and down with excitement. I couldn't wait to finally eat. A moldy teddy bear, alphabet blocks, and a rocking horse for toddlers. Those were all the finds. I checked every room a few times, hoping to find something interesting. Then a loud creak echoed from the second floor. Goosebumps ran all over my body, and I slowly headed upstairs. Everything on the second floor looked normal, except for one thing. The locked attic door had swung open. The rickety stairs descended and beckoned inside. Exhaling, I climbed up. The space was tighter than the basement, and the attic itself resembled a workshop. I walked over to the small window where light illuminated the master's work table. On it lay rusty sewing scissors, a few scraps of fabric, buttons, and a large fabric bundle. "Emma, come down for dinner," Mom's voice called from afar. Something was interesting in the bundle, so I grabbed it immediately. "Emma, do you hear me?" Her voice became sterner.
"Coming!"
I shouted, quickly unwrapping the treasure. A beautiful porcelain doll, dirty with earth, peeked out from under the fabric. Typically, these dolls are kept in glass cabinets and no one is allowed to touch them. The frilly dress had once been for a ball, but now looked like a rag. Black glass eyes stared straight at me. When something moved deep within them, I flinched, quickly wrapped the doll back up, and bolted to the kitchen. When night came, lying in the new bed, I constantly felt someone's gaze. Every creak made my heart race, making it hard to sleep. I woke up several times to a tapping noise, but it was just a branch hitting the window. In the morning, I met the doll's gaze. She was staring at me from the nightstand near the bed. Those immobile black eyes pierced right through me. The discomfort made me sit up abruptly, and I noticed dark stains of damp earth in my bed. Mom was busy, so after breakfast, I had to find ways to entertain myself. The doll and I went outside. I can't say I was happy about my new friend, but my toys hadn't arrived yet, so I had no choice. By lunchtime, I had a headache, and my whole body felt heavy. I threw the doll aside and went to find Mom. "You didn't sleep well. Just lie down for a while." As I climbed to the second floor, I heard faint rustling behind me. But in a moment, I realized it wasn't just rustling. Someone was walking right behind me. Fear tightened around my throat. Turning around, I saw the familiar outline of a ball gown. The doll was sitting on the steps below. Who had brought it there? Without looking back, I ran, slammed the door of my room shut, and immediately hid under the blanket. I stayed there until I fell asleep. Over the next few days, Mom was tormented by a severe migraine. I also felt drained and no longer wanted to sleep alone, but Mom was adamant. "You're too old for that." One evening, I was playing with the doll in the hallway when the light suddenly went out. I felt something move in my hands. My heart skipped a beat. I threw the doll into the darkness. My hair stood on end. Someone was breathing quietly downstairs. The breathing was wheezy, but it grew louder and louder and louder. The light came back on. The doll was gone. Tears came to my eyes, and I ran to my parents' bedroom.
"Mom?"
I pulled the handle, but the door was locked. Quiet sobs filled the hallway. I was in for another night alone. The following days, she only got worse. Mom was irritable and constantly slept due to the migraine. I tried to talk to her about the strange happenings, but it was useless. "It's just your imagination. You'll get used to the sounds of the house. It's just us here." But I was having nightmares where I was buried alive. Every night, I woke up gasping for air, drenched in cold sweat. The house seemed to be draining the life out of us. That's how the first week passed. The next night, I woke up from another nightmare and heard a muffled whisper coming from the dark corner of the room. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Breathing became harder as if something was squeezing my throat. Then I saw it. The doll was staring at me with its black, hollow eyes from the nightstand. In the darkness, its smile twisted into an unrecognizable, mocking grin. It dawned on me that the whisper was coming from that cursed toy. It kept repeating and repeating,
"Let me out! Let me out!"
In despair, I covered my head with a pillow and burst into tears of helplessness. I don't know how much time passed, but I eventually passed out, and in the morning, I was awakened by the sound of a car outside the window. The doll was gone from the dresser. Finally, the workers arrived. I watched with interest as they hauled the junk out of the house and broke into the attic. The accursed bundle with the doll lay untouched on the table. I tossed it into the trash box and felt a wave of relief. At the same time, a careless worker dropped the mannequin from the basement, and its porcelain head shattered with a loud crack. Out of the mannequin spilled fabric stained with something brown and a tuft of hair. Mom quickly recovered once the junk and all the dolls, of which there were several dozen in old boxes, were removed from the house. A week later, we found Grandma's diary and were shocked. Grandpa wasn't just a doll maker, he was an occultist. He used ancient scriptures to imbue his creations with special protective powers. Grandpa made toys to order in the likeness of their owners. He He would place a lock of hair and a piece of cloth with the client's blood into the doll to establish a connection. The neighbor girl, Rosa, suffered from narcolepsy. The porcelain creature from the attic was made especially for her. Grandpa decided to try a new ritual to cure her illness. Everyone loved the doll, especially its new owner, but a few days after receiving the gift, Rosa died. Her grief-stricken parents blamed Grandpa for their daughter's death. Rumors spread, and he was hounded until he fled the town under pressure. But something turned out to be even stranger. Grandma wrote that they couldn't remove the doll from Rosa's hands, so they were buried together. At the parents' request, a murder investigation was launched, so later the grave was exhumed to examine the body and the toy for signs of poisoning. The doll was missing from the coffin, and the girl's fingers were covered in dried blood. Deep nail marks were found on the lid of the coffin. Her face was frozen in a grimace of horror.